The Tag on the Key. Book 1, The Plan. Chapter 23B. New School. Although it was possible to take sports in that school, it was not obligatory. Not much was, as I have mentioned. However, the school did offer a course in Outward Bound. This was a very good experience for me in particular. In Outward Bound, you go outside to the elements. It never gets rained out. We had the rope course, where participants are required to cross over a small pond while suspended on ropes. I don't remember anybody falling in, but there was a certain degree of challenge to it. There was a course in rock climbing. On the local mountain, there was a patch of rock face that we had to climb up. And once we succeeded in climbing up, we were taught how to rappel down the face of the mountain. It was an exhilarating sensation. We had a midterm, 1-week hike on the Appalachian Trail in northwestern Connecticut. This took place in the middle of February. It was cold, it was rainy, it was snow and ice, and it was muddy sometimes. It was restricted to only students. We were totally on our own. This was in order to preserve the idea of self-reliance in the wilderness. If there was any type of emergency, we were being followed by the instructor at a distance. One of the participants wasn't able to complete the trip, and the instructor did come. The participant in question was taken home early. We hiked in the rain, climbed down a mountain in a snowstorm, and slept as a group in lean-tos. It was an experience that taught us a number of valuable lessons. One lesson was not to give up when things were difficult. Another was to think of the other people on the team and to try to be of assistance to them whenever possible. We learned to be resourceful and we learned to plan. Then there was the solo. We would go out for one 24-hour period, build our own shelter, and light our own fire, etc. I built my shelter, sure enough, and lit my fire too. As I dozed off to sleep, I first began to hear the sizzling sound of raindrops falling on my fire. As the raindrops came in greater numbers, the fire naturally went out. Then it started raining in torrents, but I was on top of a ridge, so I was not worried about being flooded out. Then came the thunder and lightning. Well, it was marvelous. However, it occurred to me that I might be in some danger since I was located on the top of a mountain in an electrical storm. Perhaps, I thought, it would be better for me to take cover somewhere else, a bit lower down the slope. It was absolutely amazing. The lightning storm kept on and on. I moved position, but reluctantly, because I had misplaced my glasses at the original campsite. The lightning was not far off. You could tell by the shortening time intervals between lightning and thunder. As day finally broke, I made my way back to Camp 1 and managed to recover my glasses. It had been a hell of a night. Outward Bound was where I was really introduced to long-distance running. It was really something good for me. It was a type of sport and exercise that was not vision dependent, and I could just take things at my own pace, literally, for as long as I wanted. It gave me a certain sense of tranquility and of accomplishment in my life. I will be clear at this point. It would be hard for me to write the story without writing about the following schoolmate. I met him on the second day of the first grade. On the first day of the school year, the Manchester Board of Education made a decision to redraw the lines of the school districts for the local elementary schools. The redistricting went into effect on the second day of the school year. That is how I came to have hobo in my first grade class at Buckley Elementary School. So began many years of a complicated friendship. His name was Horace Beauregard Snodgrass, but we just called him Hobo, and he didn't seem to mind. He was present throughout much of my school career. I cannot say that he was a very positive influence on me or anybody else, but he definitely was a very influential personality. By this I mean no one was without an opinion about him. Many were quite wary of him. I wish that I could say some validating things about him. He really did have an unbelievable sense of humor. He was a true comedian. However, most of what I remember about him were his pranks. The problem with his pranks was that they were sometimes very cruel actions against other human beings that he had absolutely no legitimate gripe with. There was the time in the movie theater, the episode at the toll booth, and the altercation at the restaurant, to name only a very few. At the movie theater, there was a place upstairs called the mezzanine. There was a kind of open round hole in the middle of the upper floor, surrounded by a railing. You could look down from there and see the people seated below watching the movie. Hobo was fond of a certain kind of chocolate bar. While we were up there on the mezzanine watching the people who were watching the movie, he stuffed the entire chocolate into his mouth and then pointed at the head of a bald-headed man below. We thought he was just making another one of his jokes. But then he squirted the entire mouth of melted chocolate onto the head of the hapless man sitting below, who looked up at us, shocked and then enraged. It was a face I will not soon forget. We had no idea of what Hobo had in mind when he took us up there, but we didn't need any explanation now. We got out of there as fast as we could. One time he managed to persuade the driver of our school transportation to let him go into the ticket office at the side of the road to buy a book of tickets for the toll on the bridge. He went in there with Stephen Plotkin, if I'm right, and started talking to the clerk using a British accent. He said that he would like a packet of tickets, governor. And then he added in a low voice, "Could you make the price a little cheaper?" He did this all with a perfectly straight face. But Plotkin, who was with him, just couldn't keep a straight face himself. He came back to the car, laughing hysterically about what had just happened in there. It was just too funny. They got the ticket book in the end, but no discount. We found out that he even tried to warn them that there was a Russian submarine directly underneath the bridge. All this he could do to perfect strangers with a perfectly straight face. He went with us into a restaurant. We didn't go into restaurants to eat. We were kids. We didn't have money for restaurants. He just told us, "Sit down, I'll handle this," and proceeded to order 4 burgers. When we asked him why did he order the food, was he really going to pay for it, he said, "Just sit down." When the burgers began to sizzle on the fire, he said, "I'm not hungry now, let's go." Hobo walked out of there, and we tried to tell him that what he was doing was wrong, but it was too late. By then, the chef knew he'd been had. He ran after us into the street, cursing in some foreign language. As I reflect upon these stories now, I believe that the correct thing to do would have been to stand up to Hobo. Running away with him made us appear to be just as guilty as he was. We should have stood tall and told his victims who the true perpetrator was, and we would have no part of it. That would have been the correct thing to do if we were smart. But we were not, and he used us. I would say that his parents did care for him, but he was not an easy kid in anyone's book. It is kind of sad because I really think that if he would have devoted himself seriously in just one of his numerous talents, he would have built up his self-esteem enough to where he could have been a great benefit to society. His mother died of cancer, his father died of natural causes, and so Hobo came to live alone. He failed to answer the phone when called. After a few more days, he was found dead. I hope that his memory would be for a blessing. I really do. I would like to emphasize and re-emphasize the importance of associating with upright people. Choose good friends for yourself and encourage your children to develop friendships with good kids. I cannot stress this enough. From this, you can readily understand the importance of avoiding people who are bent on purposely hurting others for their own gratification. Stay far away from people who build themselves up by stepping on others. That is not the way to be friends. Surround yourself with goodness as much as possible. The most lasting impression of that school were the kids who were handicapped. I was very impressed with one of them in particular. His name was Keith. He had 2 half arms that finished just before where the elbows should have been. He also had 1 leg that was a stump. It went only until before his knee. The left leg, I believe, went only as far as the ankle. At that end, he had a heavy piece of steel. He used to eat by having someone place a sandwich on one of his stump arms, and then he would take bites. He would write by somehow positioning a pencil or pen between his cheek and shoulder, then moving his upper body in that position and sighting down to the paper, he would write. He succeeded in obtaining a state of Connecticut driver's license. The car he drove was fitted with special contraptions so that he could steer the car, brake, and accelerate. He was not shy. He would sign up for all kinds of sports, including hand-to-hand combat and soccer. In hand-to-hand combat, nobody wanted to fight him because, well, you can't hit somebody who doesn't have arms. So the instructor took Keith on in hand-to-hand. Keith unleashed everything he had against the instructor, including that steel fixture on the end of his leg. He was definitely not easy to tangle with. He had these special crutches with pockets for him to stick his stump arms into. While using these crutches, he could accelerate down the soccer field faster than anyone expected. And when he connected to the ball with his steel fixture, watch out. I can still hear him charging down the soccer field, shouting his war cries. He was ferocious. There were not many rules at the school, but one of the rules was that if asked, we had to drop whatever we were doing and assist the disabled students. That usually meant to push them up the steep hill in their wheelchairs. There were 2 students in wheelchairs. One had 2 arms and 2 legs, but they did not do him much good. He was quite bitter about his lot and would just give orders to take him here or to take him there. He was quite heavy, so it was not so easy to push him up the hill. At reaching his destination, he hardly ever said a thing, and he certainly did not say thank you. Keith, on the other hand, would always ask if we were busy. Then he would politely ask if we could be so kind as to push him up the hill. At the top, he would always thank us profusely until he could see a smile on our faces. He always had a smile on his. I think that it was worth going to that school just for that experience. I had been playing a lot of guitar and was considering a musical career. I went to look at a few different schools, one of which was the University of Rochester. I took one look at the library and said, "That looks like a great place to learn." Additionally, the Eastman School of Music was not far away. The last year there was the 73-74 school year. I was thinking of graduating early and starting college in the winter term. Chapter 24, Yom Kippur War. Everything changed on one day. Israel was attacked on Yom Kippur, and that really struck me to the core. They really did pick on us again. I dropped all my plans and volunteered to work in Israel for the year. I had no idea at that time how much that would change the course of my life.